Charlotte Harbor National Estuary Program is a partnership working to protect the natural environment from Venice to Estero Bay to Winter Haven. Southwest Florida is not like other places. It's hot in the tropics. Our soil is mostly sand with limited nutrition for plants, and our rainfall seasons, wet and dry, are more important to plants than the 4 seasons. This video introduces you to a few of your neighbors who are good stewards of this special environment because they have a yard that is Florida-friendly. We encourage you to transform your yard into a beautiful Florida-friendly oasis that conserves precious water resources and provides habitat for wildlife while reducing pollution and saving you time, energy, and money.
I converted in the beginning of 1990 basically because the freeze of '89 in December basically gave me a clean slate to start with. I had a typical variety of tropical Florida plants in my yard, and they were all reduced to just oozing piles of cellulose. So I was left with a lawn and a pecan tree. That was about it. So I started fresh. It was a creeping conversion because when I started, I basically started putting in trees first, and from there just worked basically around the fence line. From there I've moved all the way into the middle of the yard. And of course I started in the backyard, and now it's creeped out into the front yard. And it's even creeping towards my neighbors. Originally, the majority of the backyard here was just covered in pine straw mulch. And as I said, I started moving from the fence line towards the center, and as you can see, I experimented with a number of different ground covers and eventually more or less replaced the mulch with various ground covers that includes like corky stem passion vine, sunshine mimosa, and twin flowers, and there are several other things that you can use.
Well, first of all, we knew that grass was not going to grow here, and you can spend so much money in pesticides, fertilizers on trying to grow grass. So if you can just let it grow into its own meadow area and attract birds and butterflies and other wildlife, you do have to eliminate the old grass and some of these weeds that you don't want. And then as you decide what plants are going to be good in this area, like the beach sunflower loves it where it's hot and dry, and they don't need any care. That's what you'll be looking for, is things that don't need a lot of attention or a lot of care or a lot of water. We try to conserve the water too.
We started by taking out the grass so we could plant natives. We also built these beds as a way of stopping the stormwater runoff, and this is all the grass we have left.
Owners of waterfront property have to be extra vigilant in order to protect the water from harmful stormwater runoff.
What we did was we used this coral rock and we built kind of a dam. This stops mulch, any debris from going in our canal. What we've got growing here is a ground cover called sunshine mimosa, which is wonderful, and that also stops things. It keeps erosion. Keeps it from falling into our beloved canals. In this area, what we've done is we've created this planting bed, we've got a walkway, we've got another planting bed behind me. All this slows down any water that may go into our canal.
Well, the plants that you plant close to water are called littoral plants. They're plants that can stand in water, they can be on dry land, they can take almost any environment. So they're put in here, and what you'll see here is a golden canna, duck potato, blue flag iris, and of course in the background is the pond apple tree. All of these are very good to plant near the water. The biggest benefit to putting these plants in is that they absorb the nutrients and any pesticides that might be washed from the lawns into the water are absorbed by the roots of these plants, and therefore the water does not get polluted. The algae is kept down. The native ground cover that is in our backyard is called Muhly grass. My hope is that eventually it will cover the whole backyard and the lawn will disappear because the lawn is not native to this area.
Even though the Kowalskis have a lot of turf, protecting the lake is their priority. So how do they manage to do that?
There are a lot of weeds in the grass, and because we have so many people around us that use fertilizers and have lawn service, that we decided not to use fertilizer because we have the water behind us, so we didn't want the runoff. It's important to plant vegetation, especially down by the water, to provide cover for the birds that like to come near the water. So we've got cannas in here, native cannas, native iris. I've got a Dahoon tree, which will provide berries for the birds. And I've got some scarlet hibiscus coming up.
One of the things that I've done is that I've created swells down both sides of the house that channel all the water into the pond through these culverts, and it just discharges into my pond I have here, which basically is a gigantic rain barrel. And what I've done is I'm trying to create habitat. I've planted some pickerel weed, there's some walking iris, and there's some rushes, so that the small fish have a place to hide, and use boulders. That when we dug the pond, we found some boulders, and so we've used them in the pond to create habitat for the fish and the birds. And so one of the other things that we've done is we try to capture every bit of water that comes that falls in this piece of property stays in this piece of property.
Mangroves will grow forever, I think, if you let them. Many people like to have a buffer, an opening in the buffer, a window, so they can see the water, because mangroves are always found on water. And there are rules that you have to go by to trim the mangroves, because you don't want to trim them back so far that you kill them. In the branches, birds roost. Birds, they don't nest there, but they do roost. Below water, the mangroves do serve as a nursery. Little fish and little crustaceans hide in the mangrove roots, and so they can grow there without being eaten by bigger fish. In a windy situation, the mangroves serve as a buffer, and they take the wind action instead of having the erosion or going actually to whatever is behind the mangroves, which may be someone's house.
Even if you don't live directly on the water, you can help reduce harmful runoff from going into the watershed by having a gravel or shell driveway.
For one thing, it absorbs the water when you get a heavy rain. It absorbs a lot of water, and it also filters a lot of the oil and grease from your cars before it gets into the runoff.
In doing a Florida-friendly yard, one thing you have to remember is to put the right plant in the right place. By that we mean plants that require more sunlight should be grouped together than plants that require the shade. Also, their watering needs. If you have some plants that really need to be watered often, put them together. Then it's okay to water them. Why spread them out in your yard? If you have plants that are drought tolerant, keep those together so they don't need much water. This is my butterfly garden here, but all these plants are drought tolerant. They do not need much water, so we have them grouped together.
The right place for your ferns and other plants as well. As you can tell, there's a variety here. They prefer the shade because the heat is overwhelming to them and takes away a lot of their moisture. In the shade, downspout, natural water, and rain spout. It's in this area. They do get a little bit in the afternoon, but for maybe about 2 hours, and that's it, as far as sun.
Here you're looking at one of the easiest, the beach sunflower. It grows profusely. In fact, you have to keep pruning it back, and the butterflies love it. It makes a beautiful ground cover, and I really think it's probably the easiest plant you could put in your beginning garden. I'd recommend the Gaillardia, the blanket flower. It is prevalent all over Florida, in fact most of the United States, and it loves this environment right here. Makes a lovely showy flower. The butterflies love it, and it seeds itself profusely. They're all salt tolerant. If they weren't, they would not be growing at all. I would lose them. And I've lost several that I've tried. So it's sort of a trial and error method. And what likes it, just let them go to town.
This is a picture of firebush, and I particularly like this shrub because it's so versatile. This plant is growing in partial sunlight, gets early morning sun, and the one that's around on the side of the house is in very, very dense shade. The only difference is that it develops a much deeper green and much larger leaf. Another nice feature of this native Florida plant is that if you want to propagate them, you don't have to go to a nursery after you establish the first plant, because all you have to do is clip off a shoot, stick it in the ground, keep it watered for about a month, and you've got your own seedlings.
The type of plants that do well in alkaline soil you'll see here in the foreground are Muhly Grass. Next to me is a Kunti. Directly behind me we have a Pygmy Palm, does very well. We also have a low shrub with a downy jasmine, and in the background a black olive.
Attracting and providing habitat for wildlife is another important reason to have a Florida-friendly yard.
I wanted to put a pond in especially to attract birds, wildlife, snakes, frogs. Everything is interconnected, and you need water for them to drink, you need water for fish to swim in, you need water for frogs to breed in. The snakes go after the frogs. I've had a bobcat here who went in for a swim on a really hot day. I've had birds flying in to obviously cool off and clean themselves. Just another attractant for the critters that share our lives here in Florida.
Well, this is a very, very dead palm tree, and we leave it standing here because the birds love it. As you look up the tree, you'll see holes made by the pileated woodpeckers and others. I think I saw a red-bellied sapsucker out here. And in fact, last year we had a mama screech owl raise her babies in that odd-shaped hole up there.
This is a native plant. This is a sea grape, and Hurricane Charlie damaged it terribly, and Hurricane Wilma did it in. So we needed to take it down, so we called out a landscaper and they topped it. We saved the branches and we put them horizontally, and then I started decorating it. I put in bromeliads. We've got a vine growing on it, which goodness knows. We've got a lot of native Spanish moss. The birds absolutely love this. They roost up there. They use the moss for their nesting materials, and these bloom, and it was an absolute gorgeous sight a couple of weeks ago. Also, this is our bird bath here, so the birds will come, they will just hang out and use the bird bath. Bromeliads are epiphytes. They do not take any nutrition from their root. They take all the nutrition from the inside here. So there's very little to do with them.